All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. This is Warrior Woman 91, and welcome to the Renegade Millennials. That is right, we are back with an epic show featuring some very cool guests. These are college students from all over the country here to talk about their various experiences being conservatives on leftist college campuses. So please welcome Ben McDonald from Gonzaga University and Stephen Taylor from American University. And then shortly we will also have at Cynical Ann from Twitter. She's from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and I apologize, Ann, if I cannot pronounce your last name. You will have to clarify when she comes on. So really excited to have you guys all here today. Quick audience note, all death threats, memes, and marriage proposals should be directed to the comment section where I'll be sure not to read them. And any questions you may have, please send to my Twitter account at WarriorWoman91, and if we have time, and we probably will, we will try and answer them. So let's get started. So we have Ben McDonald, who is a former student of Melissa Click, the infamous Melissa Click. We had, back in March, we had the videographer who she famously told that she was going to get muscle to throw him out of a protest for attempting to record for journalistic activity. He was trying to record video of the protest at University of Mizzou, and she famously threw him out. So we now have a student who has taken a class with her since then, and I'd like to hear what that experience was. It apparently was not a bad experience. So let's hear from Ben McDonald.
Okay, so I got on the first day of class, I saw her name on the attendance sheet, and UTC professors are, but I didn't think it would be her. And then I walked in on the first day of class, and it was her. And so I walked in that class, I was like, I texted my dad, and I'm like, should I transfer? And I believe, and Bandler was like, no, Bandler convinced me to stay in class just in case something happened. But then she wasn't that bad because she's only here on a 1-year tenor. Like she's just here for 1 year, like a contract thing. So I guarantee you she was just holding back. Because like 2 weeks into the semester, the school newspaper wrote an article about her saying she was on campus. And everyone everyone in the class read it and was like, oh. And so we got to class that day, and she I don't want to talk about it. It happened, but I'm not going to talk about it. So just don't ask me about it. But then the politics in the class weren't that bad because she never really got political. It was just how to speak better. Except for you could definitely, especially since around the election, it definitely got worse.
So what class was it specifically?
It was Communications 101. It was a mandatory. It was a mandatory communications class that you have to take. And so I got her as my professor. And so the class was basically how to be a better public speaker. It's like different tactics to use. We had to write essays and do speeches and stuff.
So was she fairly reasonable with you, open-minded? Would she allow other kinds of opinions in a predominantly leftist university?
Yeah, so she would generally just play devil's advocate, but she would go harder against me than she would the other kids. Because for my final speech, I did why the minimum wage should be abolished. And when I presented that to the class, she basically said I was wrong when I presented it as an idea, but she let me present it still, but she was definitely hesitant and didn't like that at all. Yeah, and then the day after the election was probably the worst in that class, just because all the tensions were high. And I was in a good mood that day, but
I'll bet you were.
But yeah, so her politics weren't that bad, but you could definitely understand her political leanings. But you could also tell she was holding back because she stepped back from subjects that she thought would be touchy.
So was she just kind of trying to lay low, I guess?
Yeah, because I mean, if she got fired here after just being fired from Mizzou, she'd basically never work again. So, and she's only here through May. So after May, they can choose to re-up her contract or not. So just depending. So I think she wanted to never work again.
So how has your experience been at the university as a whole? How did other students or other professors treat you, as a conservative on a leftist college campus?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. My class I'm in right now, the American politics class, my teacher is extremely hardcore to the left. Like I've been tweeting about her during the class, but she she said the founding fathers have privilege. She didn't know what the Eighth Amendment was, stuff like that. Like, she's not that bright. But then, like, when I got to college, I didn't think it was going to be that political. But like, you hear all the stories about how political and how left college campuses are. But I just kind of thought of those as like false stories. I didn't actually think they were real until I got to campus. I was like, oh, it really is that bad.
Yeah.
And then we've gotten emails like when Trump did his immigration ban a month ago, with the head of the religious studies department sent an email saying we stand with our students. No discrimination. And it's just small things, really. And then the women's march, there's a bit during the women's march, it went all the way. They went through Gonzaga and held up signs, and that was a sight to see.
So you actually attended the women's march. How were you?
I did.
As a white cisgender man?
Also, I went with one of my friends from the college Republicans here, and we kind of acted like we were just part of like we believed in all that crap they were spouting. She wrote a sign like "Smash the Patriarchy," but she was holding that sign around. So, but then, so like, it's insane what people actually believe that stuff. Because when I saw it, I didn't think it was actually real, but then you get there and it is.
All right, so we're going to move on to Stephen from American University. Stephen is actually a returning guest. If you are a regular watcher of the show, you would have seen him back in June when he used to be a Californian, and now he's all the way on the East Coast. Yep. So welcome back, Stephen. It's been a while. So being at American University, you have a lot more opportunities to, attend events in DC. Right. You got to go to the presidential inauguration and CPAC. Why don't you tell us a little bit about first your experience at the inauguration, because there was a lot of protesting going on and some really epic meltdowns of leftists during the inauguration. So what was that like for you?
For the most part, I was in the ticketed area, and I didn't really find any problems with protesters too much. I think most of the people in the ticketed areas are people from out of town coming in, reserving tickets, people who supported him. I was able to reserve mine right after the election. But I think most of the protesting was going on in the areas where people wouldn't come from other places to be in the non-ticketed area, I believe. So I think it's people from D.C. who are, activists, left-leaning activists who came, and they were protesting in the back areas. And so I didn't see too much of the protesting. I did, I'm trying to think. I did hear about some stories of people being like, there's people on my floor who went to the protests. They said it got pretty crazy, and even they probably wouldn't go again. That's one of the reasons I didn't go to the Women's March here in DC. I thought that the protesting was going to get worse. But for the most part, I didn't really see most of what you saw on TV. I think that the front end of the inauguration, the front part, was relatively all Trump supporters. I did hear a lot of Obama, not a lot. I heard some Obama birther stuff going on in the crowd, which I found funny because he's moving out of office on that day. We can drop it. Right. We're done.
Right. Yeah.
We had that battle before, and it was a stupid battle, and I didn't agree with it, and I don't know why we're bringing it up now. So I definitely realized there are parts of the Republican Party who are still holding on to that for some reason. I also realized that there are parts where, say, Chuck Schumer came out and was talking, and it's before he even says anything, and they're already booing. I don't like Chuck Schumer. I'm not a fan of Chuck Schumer. But if you're going to boo while he's talking, you're not even listening to what he's saying. And what I found interesting was that he was saying, equality for all, obviously as a dig to Trump, but they were still booing. I'm like, you can't boo that statement and have people take you seriously. So there were parts on both sides of the aisle at the inauguration that I didn't agree with, but I had a great time. It was great to witness history, and it was a fun time.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were feeling a little bit left out. Ann, do you have your headphones in?
Yep, I do.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, so I just want to finish up with Steven. So you got to go to CPAC, and were you actually you saw Trump's speech
I did.
live in the room, and
Yes.
you were the only one who you said booed his trade policy there. So why don't you tell us what happened there with Trump's speech?
Okay, so he can work a room. That is undeniable. He's very good at pausing at the right times for clapping, and he can get people energetic. I was clapping when he was saying things like supporting the veterans or protecting the Second Amendment. I'm not going to boo him for that, obviously, but he was talking about rescinding TPP as he did, and then reworking NAFTA, things like that, to which I was the only one booing. And it's not a large venue. They make it look large on TV. That's what I've noticed. But it's really, I was relatively close to him, and he can hear when no one else is talking and there's only one person. I don't know if he heard me. Would have been funny if he did. But it was basically me and only me booing him. And I was just boo. And everyone around me looked at me and just gave me a dead, like, don't do that stare. But other than that, it was a fun time. I think anyone who's interested in going to CPAC should. It's regardless of my views on Donald Trump, which aren't supporting him. It was a great experience to see Mark Levin and all those people.
Yeah, that's a really great opportunity you have to be in DC like that so that you can attend all these events. I'm very, very jealous, obviously, on the other side of the country. So now we have our final guest, Ann, and I really do not know how to pronounce your last name. Is it Lieven?
Yeah.
Or Levin?
Lieven, yeah.
Lieven, okay, all right. So I found you through YouTube because of the video you did when you attended Ben Shapiro's speech at University of Madison, or University of Wisconsin at Madison, I should say. You were in the front row, I guess, and you were actually harassed by some of the protesters. So why don't you tell us what was that experience like there?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy because I worked with I have some friends in the YF group there, and they were like, hey, if you want to sit in the front with us, that'd be great. And I said, oh yeah, sure. So they actually had been protesting threats done previously before the event started, and I was like, oh no, they're not going to protest, totally no way. But about 5 or 10 minutes into Shapiro's speech, they started yelling shame from the audience, and they stopped doing that one and switched to safety when Shapiro pointed out that the bad guys of Game of Thrones say shame, which I thought was funny because it's very true. But yeah, and so they get into a line in front of the stage, and there was this guy. He's like 6'3". I'm 5'4". I'm not very physically intimidating, but he wasn't really. None of them were really looking at us, so I had to like kind of get his attention to talk to him because they were saying they were doing the safety chant, and so I thought that was ridiculous. And so I said, don't you understand that you're the imminent threat? And he gets in my face and he points at me and he goes, and then he goes, you just threatened me. You just threatened me. And I thought that was hilarious because no, I didn't. And two, even if I did threaten him, it would be kind of a hollow threat. But and the other person that was leading the protest, then he spoke up, which is the only reason that I got out of that without having or whatever what it would turn into. So it was a very short encounter, but I think that the worst part about it is that we were told that if they didn't get out there in 1 minute, that we'd be shut down, even though it wasn't our protest.
Right.
Disruptive. It was.
So basically what the rules were is you have to let them protest or the whole event gets shut down. Yep.
If they got arrested, the whole event would be shut down. And if they had protested for 1 minute longer, we would have gotten shut down. Exactly have a winning stance there, but so members, they had to deal with that for a while.
Yeah, so you guys basically got punished for them coming in and disrupting your event.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Yeah, are the students at University of Madison, that volatile all the time, or was it like an organized protest specifically targeting Ben's speech?
It was I think two different organizations that got together. I suppose I don't know if they're normally like this. I think there have been speakers in the past, and I don't think that something of that ilk happened.
Mm-hmm.
The year before, Dinesh D'Souza came down to campus, and I think that they let him go. I think that he wasn't protested at all. So, Hero specifically.
That seems odd to me, or maybe it isn't odd. Maybe it's Ben's rhetoric is a little bit more confrontational, perhaps, or it's just why single out Ben, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's because he's white, because Dinesh D'Souza obviously is an Indian man,
Right,
so he's a little bit
right.
darker. So they can't immediately call him a white supremacist, so that's their whole line of reasoning, so that one's out for him. Both right protests, there was this man in the audience that pulled up a swastika, and he said that Ben should wear it, to which Ben pointed to his yarmulke and said, no, that's really stupid.
Yeah.
But so I guess since he's a white man and he's not a minority and he's not a woman, I guess that's just the first excuse they look for. Ben also, I think, does a little bit. He's a faster talker almost, so also I think that he gets enough points in rapid fire that it scares them, so naturally they can't live.
Right. Yeah.
That's my reason behind it.
So, has your experience? You're actually a student at Madison, is that correct?
Not at Madison.
Not at Madison.
I'm doing my undergrad not undergrad, the first 2 years in the nearby technical college.
So what is your experience in at that college? Do you have any trouble with professors targeting you or students targeting you because of your conservative beliefs at all?
I would have to say I haven't been really that speaking out as much as most conservative students do. I've been kind of going under the radar.
Yeah.
Mainly because I'm a lady, so they automatically don't assume I'm be a conservative. There have been, I decided to be stupid and I took a gender and ethnic studies class in the first semester during college. And in that one, I actually got called out a few times and heckled for having not even a conservative view on things, having a more libertarian view on things, or even I've heard some liberals say stuff like this, but it wasn't leftist, so I was called out for that. Say that viewpoints specifically have not been targeted for me, only because I haven't been spouting off as much as I normally would.
Yeah, I definitely can feel that. I used to, it's kind of a balance when you're a conservative student. Do I speak out here, or do I just want to, kind of lay low and get that nice A on my transcript?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, behind the scenes, I generally would not lay low, and I suffered for that. So one of the things I want to talk about with you guys now, kind of opening up to all three of you, is the whole situation with Milo. And it's not necessarily Milo I want to talk about. It's more so the direction that the Republican Party is taking for a conservative organization and event like CPAC to have initially invited him as the headline act, basically. What does that say about the conservative movement? Are we moving too far to the right, or are we actually taking on some leftist tendencies? Why don't we start with Stephen?
I don't know. I do understand what you're saying about the acceptance of Milo at CPAC and wanting him to come initially, but Richard Spencer was also there, and I'm not linking those two. I don't know enough about Richard Spencer, but there was a crowd around him and of press people, and then he was there for about an hour to 2 hours, and then he was kicked out. So I don't want to say that the conservative movement is heading that direction. I'm hoping that the conservative movement was just saying to Milo, we don't really agree. That's what I think Matt Schlapp said, that the director. He said that CPAC doesn't have to agree with essentially everything that a speaker stands for. And they're just promoting free speech and different ideas within the movement. I think that it would have been ill-timed for them to allow Milo to come after the tape was blown up. I think that was probably more political, in my opinion. They didn't want everyone saying, oh my gosh, this just came out and they're still allowing him to speak. So I don't know if I wouldn't go so far as to say that Milo is now the mainstream of the conservative movement. I think that the reason that they didn't have him there was more so, we don't want all of this around CPAC. We want to have an actual discussion.
Right. They were trying to kind of save face with all the bad press that they were getting. Ben, what do you think about the Milo situation? Do you think that it is showing, well, even just with what Stephen was talking about, how people were cheering Trump saying he loves Bernie, and also we just saw, if you go to dailywire.com, you'll see Rick Santorum is now saying that he supports Bernie Sanders' trade policy. Is this indicative of a more isolationist and protectionist trade policies that are now coming to be a part of the Republican Party?
So I don't know how prominent it is, but I think it is essential to call out the more left tendencies that have developed. Did you see with Santorum like saying he agrees with Sanders on trade and stuff like that? I think as long as you call it out, I think it's fine, because we have the majority now. So I think as long as we work with that and don't let the fringe that's kind of started to develop that isn't representative. Because I mean, if we just let it go, then I think it'll develop into something more and be more hurtful. But as long as it's called out, I think it should be fine. I don't think it's becoming more prominent necessarily. I think they're getting more attention, but I don't think they themselves are as important as they like to think they are.
Would you say that it's similar to the alt-right, which is a very small group of people?
Yeah, I mean, they get more attention than they're worth. Like, they're not actually that big of a deal.
Right.
But people like to make them out to be this huge.
Yeah, they like to tie, mainstream conservatism with, the nasty elements of the fringe. And what would you say? Yeah. And did you want to weigh in on the Milo thing? Have you been following it at all?
Yeah. I think that the conservative movement nowadays, I think that we have the opportunity to be more upfront about our views, especially since we're combating something as radical leftism. But I think that the way that many conservative leaders are thinking about doing it is trying to get spectacle. For example, they invited Milo, who he's self-pronounced non-conservative. He's a populist And I mean, since he's just been blown up so much in the news lately, they're like, oh, we have to have him because now that we can create a spectacle, we can get more people interested in the conservative movement, which I have problems with. I think that it's not really the way to go. I think that since radical leftism is they're not going to bend on any view, I don't think that we should be absorbing any into our platform, especially since it's such a vile movement in general. Not liberalism, that's just a competing philosophy, of course, but leftism.
Right.
I think that CPAC did something that was completely appropriate, which is if you say anything in any way that could be misconstrued to be condoning pedophilia, I think that you have the right to be dropped, especially since CPAC is private, so you have no freedom of speech there. Well, I shouldn't say you have no freedom of speech, but it's not protected under the government. And if I were CPAC, I'd have done the same thing, except I would have done it much earlier. I mean, the tape didn't have to be leaked; it was on YouTube for the longest time. But
so, the whole Milo thing for me, it really does. It is a concern to me that a mainstream conservative event like CPAC would give him that kind of credibility. Perhaps, to Stephen's point, if you wanted to have a competing point of view or even an alternative point of view brought to CPAC, I wouldn't be opposed to that. However, to have him be the headline act is kind of that is where I had the biggest problem with with the initial invite. So even prior to the video, I had a problem with that, because that it's kind of like, this is what when it's the headline act, it is saying to me, this is what we stand for, basically.
Right.
And then you have somebody who is, he's more libertarian on some issues. He's been friendly with the alt-right on these issues over here. That is not what the mainstream conservative platform is to the majority of us. And so I guess my point is that if you wanted him there, have him be a smaller event, have him be on a panel, have him do a smaller speech, not the headline, the keynote speaker.
Right.
So I'm curious to know, we'll start with Ann on this one. How did you guys become conservative at your age? Because you're all fairly young. You're all younger than me, I assure you. So let's start with Ann. How exactly did you become a conservative?
Let's see. But I think it's kind of like I was conservative before I was born. Both my parents are really conservative, and I grew up in that environment. And I was public schooled, so I got all that liberalism just raining on me from a young age. And so from a young age, I was like, I don't want to do this because I'm naturally rebellious.
Right.
It wasn't until college, though, that I was really like, okay, conservatism is really the way to go, because I had come in contact with the gender studies professor and the ethnic studies professor, and I thought how ridiculous it was. And I'd have to say that's when I really became a conservative.
Ben, what was your conversion story to conservatism?
Well, I pretty much got to give all the credit to my dad, because he's a super libertarian, super conservative guy. And during Obama, he sat us down at an Einstein's and basically explained to us why Obamacare was crap. And so it's just, I don't know, just what. And my mom's more on the other side of the spectrum, but it's still. And growing up in Utah too, Utah is very on the other side, so it helps to get raised around that whole environment that's more on that side.
Stephen, I happen to know you were originally from California.
Yeah.
How on the earth did you become a conservative?
So growing up, I always liked to argue about anything, and I still like to argue about pretty much everything. And I'll argue things I don't even believe in, but mostly I was arguing with my mom a lot. She would be watching the news, and I would argue with her because I just wanted to, and I had semi-liberal beliefs at that point, and then I started losing. So then I had to do more research. Started doing more research, came across, Bill Whittle, Ben, all those people were kind of sucked into the newer, younger. I mean, Bill Whittle's not young, but I think that his sense of humor and the way he approaches things can be considered a young thing. He's on YouTube. He's doing more millennial conservative things. And so I kind of got sucked into that, and then started doing my own research and, reading the other side. Now, at this point, I'm conservative, and reading the other side and kind of changing my opinions as I see fit, as the evidence is presented to me. So I didn't have like one pivotal moment where, some people, they get their first paycheck and they realize they're getting 30%, 40% taken out of their paycheck. They're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be supporting these policies.
Right.
But no, I didn't have that really. It was kind of a slow evolution, you could say. And it still is, it's a work in progress.
So let's continue with Stephen. What advice would you give to other young conservatives who either are in the college situation and they're kind of the minority, or, just if they're in high school or whatever? What advice would you give to a young conservative that's like, how do I deal with being the minority among my friends, or, being the butt of the jokes or whatever?
I would say two things. One, pick your battles. I mean, Ben always says this, pick your battles. Don't argue just to argue, even though I'm totally guilty of this all the time. Follow me on Twitter or Facebook and you'll know this. But I think that picking your battles, especially in a real social setting, Facebook is a little easier because you're not face-to-face, but it's going to get more heated when you're face-to-face, in my opinion. And so that's when you should pick your battles. Secondly, I would say be decent. Too many times I see my friends who are conservative come across as very aggressive, very not mean, but very passionate. And that's good to have passion, but I think that controlling that passion helps you in convincing people. And so I haven't really had a problem with some of my most liberal friends because from the onset, I've always presented myself as a decent person. So I think that really presenting yourself as a decent person and, you know, having respect when you go into these conversations is important. But be passionate. That's not to say don't stand up for what you believe in. I don't want to come across as saying that, but make sure you control with passion is what I would say.
Ben, what would you say to other young conservatives in your situation?
I'd say get educated so that you know what you're talking about instead of, because once you get educated, learn how to argue with people who don't agree with you, because you're obviously around an area where there's going to be a lot of people who are opposed to what you think, so know how to defend what you're saying. And there's a good book called How to Be Right by Greg Gutfeld. And that breaks it down an easy way how to debate and get convincing arguments.
I've talked to you about this since you often get into political arguments on campus. One of the strategies you and I have discussed is just asking questions. So how does that actually work for you when you're in a discussion with a leftist and you're just asking questions to them instead of getting all defensive?
Because their logic is so poor, if you just ask them questions for them to defend it, they end up beating themselves because they can't actually defend themselves. So like, just ask them like why they think they're right and why they think their positions are correct, because once they start to break it down, they start to realize most of the time, they could just go for it and just know that as they're wrong. But if you ask them questions, once they start having to defend themselves, it breaks down and they end up losing.
And what would your advice be to other young conservatives like yourself?
Typically what I do with my friends is that if all of them are pretty much very left-leaning at least, what I usually do is I try to get down to the reason why they think that way. And sometimes it's based off of something that's not true, and then that's when you can convert somebody to convert them to conservatism. But I mean, for example, if you get down to the issue of what's something random like taxes, when you get down to the issue that taxes are necessary to a point, but at the end of the day, you're kind of stealing from somebody if there's no consent on one part. They will at the end say, oh, well, I guess the logic is kind of on your side there. But back to Stephen's point of picking your battles, because sometimes if an idiot, you're not going to be able to change their mind because it's coming out of an idiot's mouth. If they think you're evil, you're not going to be able to change their mind on that because they think it's coming out of an evil person's mouth. And then if you get into a debate also, you should have that mindset as well, that the person that you're talking to isn't evil or stupid. They just think differently than you. It might be based off of something that's not true, but that's the only way you could change someone's mind is if you have some kind of empathy for them.
All right, so we are going to start to wrap it up. We are going to give, obviously, at the end of every show, we're going to give shout-outs to people on Twitter. I'm going to just shout out my guests today. You can follow Ben McDonald at BMac0507. You can follow Ann at Cynical Ann, and you can follow Stephen at Tailored Right, Tailored, TaylorRidGht. So let's start with Ann. Is there anybody on Twitter you want to shout out for other people to follow?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't really have this in mind. I can't think of anyone right now, actually.
Okay. You can just say Ben Shapiro, because I think we can all agree on that one.
Yes, we can. Follow Ben Shapiro.
Yes, at Ben Shapiro. Ben, is there anybody you want to shout out?
I'm going to shout out Philo Files on Twitter. You can follow Anna Eleanor if you want. She's a commie, but I mean she's good.
Yeah.
And then Bandler's Banter, because he's got good stuff.
Oh yeah. Steven, is there anybody you want to shout out?
Yeah, I'd like to shout out Harry. I don't know how to say his last name. He writes for the Daily Wire, but
Kachatrian.
Yes, that's the one. He's been killing it on Twitter with a he posts them onto Facebook. Super funny. I highly recommend it.
His Twitter handle is Harry1T6, and he will be on the show next week. So I do want to announce next week we will be having a show with my regulars, Erin Bandler, Amanda Prestigiacomo, which I can finally say her last name. I'm really excited about that. And Harry Kachatrian and Elliot Hamilton will all be on. And then at the bottom of the hour, we are going to have Alicia Krause from The Morning Answer.
Whoa.
She will be, yeah, she's going to be our special guest. I'm very excited to have her on next week. So tune in next week, noon Pacific. It is going to be pretty stellar. So I want to thank everybody for coming on the show today. And I hope to have you all again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. We are going to go off the air.